So I will call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Monday, December 1st, 2025, and ask Dave to please call the roll.
Council President Vitiver.
Here.
Alder Revere.
Here.
Alder Madison.
Here.
Alder Evers. Alder Evers, we can't hear you, sorry. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Here.
There you have quorum.
Thank you. All right. We have no general public comment, although we do have public comment wishing to speak on item 5. So I will go to disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals on today's agenda from members of the body? Seeing none. We'll go on to the consent agenda. As I mentioned, we have a registrant wishing to speak on item 5. So we will separate that. We also will separate item 25 for a presentation and also item 26 for a presentation. And then item 27 is a closed session item. So we will be separating all of those. Are there other items that members of the body would like to have separated from the consent agenda? President Vitiver.
Item 16, please.
Item 16. Thank you, Alder. Are there any other items that members of the body would like to have separated from the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, then again, we will be separating items 5, 16, 25, 26, and 27. And President Vitiver, on the balance of the agenda, can I get a motion, please?
Move to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of the items on the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, we will record that vote. And that will take us to item 5. Item 5 is Legistar 90563, approving the allocation of funds to support community-based social service organizations that provide crisis intervention and prevention services and programming as recommended by the Community Development Division through a competitive RFP process, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to enter into agreements with those agencies to implement the the designated programs and services beginning January 1st, 2026. On item 5, we have one registrant wishing to speak. Robert Crystal of District 13, representing Worker Justice Wisconsin. Do we have Robert with us?
Mayor, I don't see Robert.
We had a phone number for a while there, but it looks like they have disappeared. Alder Madison?
I just have questions once we get to that part for staff after the speaker.
Okay. Well, it appears that we do not have our speaker with us at this point in time. So, President Vitiver, let's get a motion on item 5.
Move to adopt. Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt item 5. And then Alder Madison, questions for staff?
Yeah, more so just an overview or highlights for this funding round that may be different from the last funding round. So I've been busy and haven't had a chance to look at all of them.
I think we have Yolanda Shelton Morris with us. Alder Figueroa Cole?
Can I add to that question? I mean, I was wondering if they were going to do a quick presentation, because I have been following up, but I also kind of get a little bit disconnected. And I know that it didn't go to the Community Service Committee, so a presentation would be great or something. Thank you.
We have Yolanda Shelton Morris with us. I don't know if she has a presentation prepared, but I'm sure she can speak to the recommendations. Maybe.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My apologies. I am currently driving and I'll be to my location in 2 minutes. I do not, unfortunately, have a presentation prepared, but I do have notes to talk through the funding recommendation. If you all don't mind, I'm going to yield to Jim to kind of give a high level overview, and then I will follow up once he has finished, if that's okay.
Yes, please be safe.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't have the paper in my hand, so I want to.
No, we don't want you looking at paper while you're driving. So, Director O'Keefe?
Mayor, with your and the committee's indulgence, could we just move this further down the agenda to give Wanda an opportunity to get set up?
Any objection to tabling this item? All right, we'll take that as moved and seconded by President Vitiver and Alder Madison to place this item on the table. And seeing no objection, item 5 will stay on the table for the moment. And that will take us to item 16, which is Legistar 90963, approving the carry forward due to unanticipated delays in the execution of associated FY 2025 grant agreements between the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the City of Madison of previously authorized 2025 subrecipient contracts funded by the city's annual federal formula, CDBG Home and ESG grant allocations from HUD, approving an extension of the period of performance through December 31st, 2026 for each of the affected contracts, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute 2025-2026 contracts and or contract amendments with each of the identified subrecipient agencies as appropriate once fully executed FY25 grant agreements have been received from HUD. On item 16, President Vitiver, a motion, please.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded to approve item 16. President Vitiver, questions?
Yeah, I just was hoping that staff could talk a little bit about not necessarily what's happened, because I think we kind of maybe get that, but that what the implications are for taking this as a carry forward to the city in terms of the city's risk, and then also if there's anything with the recently revised HUD regulations that have been released, if that impacts this at all with carry forward funding. So just kind of that sphere of questions around what HUD's doing to us and how that's affecting how we work.
All right. I think this is perhaps also Director O'Keefe and Lynette.
Alder, the gist of this resolution is just recognizing that those grant agreements are not yet in place, and so the funding authorization for 2025 is about to expire, and so it's just pushing forward that authorization so that if and when those grant agreements are signed and we decide to proceed with the use of federal funds, that we'll have the authority, and the agencies that would be receiving funding would have the authority to spend them beyond the end of this year.
But so do we actually have the funds from HUD, or are we still waiting on the funds from HUD and hoping they get to us before the end of the year?
So we have the grant agreements, and we're in the process of reviewing some of the language of those agreements and some of the additional conditions that are being placed on the use of those funds that might affect some but not all of the contracts. And so we're still working through some of the details of those. There's also pending litigation affecting some of this funding, so it clearly is not going to be resolved by the end of the year to allow agencies to use the funds as they've been planned to or scheduled to.
I guess what I'm just trying to get to is, we know the funds aren't going out to the organizations, but do we have the money coming into the city? And if so, does it have to be obligated before the end of this calendar year, or if we get the federal funds, can we carry it over into the next fiscal year, into the next calendar year?
Yes, the federal funds are not limited to use in this calendar year, so we have every ability to use them beyond the end of our calendar or fiscal year.
And so what it also sounded like in your answer is that the HUD rules that were just announced recently are impacting the contracts that we can carry forward. And so you're examining the contracts with these agencies to make sure that they comply or whatever with the new HUD rules.
Yep, there are additional conditions that have been placed on the use of some of these funds that may affect our ability or our desire to use them and agencies' ability to use them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for staff on item 16? Seeing none, then item 16 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item 16? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 16. And I'm going to say that we didn't take quite enough time yet. So let's go on to item 25, which is, oh, wait, no, you may be ready. Yes, okay. So let's go back to item 5. Is there any objection to taking item 5 off the table? Seeing no objection, we will take item 5 off the table. I'll just remind us that item 5 is Legistar 90563, approving the allocation of funds to support community-based social service organizations that provide crisis intervention and prevention. And in the intervening time, we have managed to get our registrant on the line. And so let's go to that first. We have Robert Crystal of Worker Justice Wisconsin wishing to speak on item 5. Robert?
Yeah, hi. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is there a way to make my camera work, or do you guys just see my name?
We just see your name.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Robert Crystal. I'm the interim executive director here at Worker Justice Wisconsin, a worker center in Madison that's been here a little over 20 years. And I registered to speak on this item because we applied to this grant in collaboration with Voces de la Frontera. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to share a little bit about what we're trying to achieve and the importance of this work and our deep appreciation for the funding. To make a long story really short, Worker Justice and the Madison chapter of Voces de la Frontera is looking to establish an institute next year that we hope over the course of many years will grow into a very robust operation. But what we're hoping to do next year is to do a series of workshops each couple of months out of the year to train low-wage workers and immigrant workers what their rights are, both in terms as a worker and as an immigrant, but then also train them on leadership development skills so that they feel confident sharing what they've learned with their communities, whether it's their neighbors, their co-workers, their church, right? We really want to sort of organize ourselves out of a job. And so the goal for this institute is really to create an informed community that's capable of then exercising their rights together. And so, this is something that us and Voces really hope to grow over the coming years. And so we really appreciate the funding that the city is considering awarding for this kind of project. And I think it's really important for us, especially with everything going on, for folks to have good access to information about their rights, and then a community to sort of think through, well, how do you actually exercise your rights in order to improve things? Again, whether it's the workplace, the neighborhood, and so on. And so, yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that folks might have. I can also share my email address, or folks can come visit at the Worker Center. Would love to have folks here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the registrant on item 5? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here with us. And now we will go back to questions for staff on item 5. Yolanda, you heard the question, so do you want to address it?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My apologies again. Thank you for your patience. For those who do not know me, my name is Yolanda Shelton Morris. I serve as the Community Resources Manager within the City of Madison's Community Development Division, and oversee the funding process that is before you today under Crisis Intervention and Prevention. So just want to provide a brief overview of the funding recommendations that are before you. I do want to say we normally do put together a presentation that is usually by way of PowerPoint, in which we share with our Community Resources Committee, formerly known as the Community Services Committee. However, due to a delay in appointment process of that committee, as well as lack of quorum, they were not able to meet. And so we were not able to provide that presentation to them this month, or the month of November. It is anticipated that in December, we will provide an update to them, sharing the funding recommendations, so that they are aware of those funding recommendations that will be finalized by Common Council later this month. So just a quick overview of the funding recommendations for 2025. The division is recommending funding 24 agencies that represent 32 programs. This includes 10 new programs entering the Crisis Intervention and Prevention portfolio. In total, the recommendations is to allocate a little over $2 million in support of crisis response and prevention services across Madison. Of the agencies that we are recommending for funding, 15 are led by and serve people of color, immigrants, LGBTQ+ residents, and other marginalized communities, which reflects our commitment to equity-centered investment. Funding decisions were shaped by the 2025 Community Voice Survey findings, site visits and program reports, feedback from the Madison Metropolitan School District, Public Health Madison and Dane County, Madison Police Department, and Dane County Human Services. These touch points reinforce the importance of culturally responsive, community-grounded services. Our recommendations support a comprehensive continuum of services, including 24/7 crisis helplines, short-term shelter services, family stability and individual support programs, and community-wide prevention and stabilization initiatives. Our funding priorities also focus on addressing gaps identified through data and community input around youth in crisis, particularly runaway and homeless youth that are also at risk of or currently involved in the youth justice system, or at risk of being in the youth justice system, survivors of gender-based violence, our immigrant LGBTQ+ and BIPOC residents lacking culturally aligned services, families needing stabilization support, reentry navigation or housing-related crisis response, as well as neighborhoods with concentrated poverty or low access to community infrastructure. We are also including in our recommendations to prioritize agencies that demonstrate strong collaboration and have been active participants in the city's current resource service facilitation cohort, which is a part of the Crisis Intervention and Prevention Services area. This cohort model, which was originally established under the former Recovery and Stabilization area, has been a key driver in building more coordinated crisis prevention network and support services. And the new portfolio will continue and strengthen this cohort framework to ensure that agencies remain connected, aligned, know who is doing what, and working collectively to meet community needs. A significant portion of the recommended funding supports community-based prevention aimed at promoting neighborhood stability, strengthening protective factors, supporting youth and family empowerment, and reducing the likelihood of future crises. One other thing to note, there were several longstanding partners who did not apply, which contributed to being able to shift in the distribution of funding for 2025. So we had a total of 7 agencies that had previously applied in the last cycle of crisis intervention and prevention funding that did not apply this year, which allowed us to bring in new agencies that are new to the crisis and intervention funding area. A part of our focus also focuses on strengthening place-based youth strategies through collaboration with Madison Police Department. And a part of our focus is that CED staff intend to create a structured space for MPD and the youth serving agencies that we are recommending for funding to come together. So bringing the selected agencies together with MPD's neighborhood and youth engagement teams to discuss program strategies, align safety considerations, and strengthen collaboration in areas where youth are most impacted. And this also helps to support the city's broader efforts to ensure youth programming is coordinated, community-centered, and informed by both the service providers and public safety partners, particularly in neighborhoods experiencing higher levels of crisis or instability. So I know that was a lot of information. I will pause to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Yolanda. Alder Madison, questions?
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Yolanda. Just a couple questions. So I guess I'll start with what you've said most recently, because it's been a long day for me. I'm trying to write my notes down. But for the MPD part, is this a relationship to the conversations we've had as well about, MPD trying to inform or providing some information about what they're seeing, what trends they're seeing, and providing that directly to the nonprofits in a way where they can access, however it's going to be put together? I just want to be sure.
Yes. So the purpose is to bring the partners together with MPD so that they can have conversations around, again, what MPD is seeing, what the service providers are seeing. We've also talked about how can we provide awareness to community, nonprofit organizations, schools around the services that are available so that we can increase that awareness for other partners so that they know who to reach out to as well.
Gotcha. I definitely would I'll shoot you an email after this, but I definitely would like to get invited to those initial discussions, not all of them, but the initial discussions. And then you also mentioned, I didn't catch the entire description, but you also mentioned low access, but I missed the second half of that. So I'm really interested in hearing highlights, whether it's new agencies or a blend of old and new that are doing the youth and family empowerment. And the part where you were mentioning about some of these programs being in areas with low access, I'm guessing you meant low access to resources currently.
That is correct. Yeah. And in the recommendations document that was attached to this resolution, it's a very detailed outline of all the agencies and the types of services and supports that they'll be providing as it relates to place-based programming for youth.
Yep, I guess because I'll be transparent, I've not read the 14-page document fully yet. I'm more so, are you able to highlight one or two that, whether they're new or old, it doesn't really matter to me, but I'm just really interested in the youth and family, the youth part. But I did see on one page, it does note it as youth and family empowerment in the same area. So that's really what I'm looking for.
So our prevention and services areas is broken out into 2 separate areas. Mm-hmm. One is community-based individual and family support. And the other is building community and stabilization. And that is where the place-based programming for youth kind of lives. Within that area, in terms of the agencies that are being recommended for funding, we have Allied Wellness Center for Community Development. We have Bayview Community Center, Briar Patch Youth Services, East Madison Community Center, G-Safe, Kennedy Heights Community Center, the Literacy Network, Lucia Community Center, Mentoring Positives, Neighborhood House Community Center, Northside Planning Council, Worker Justice Wisconsin, YWCA Madison, and African Center for Community Development. So some of those agencies are providing youth that programming that is specific to youth, such as the Allied Wellness Center, Bayview Community Center, Briar Patch Youth Services, YWCA, Mentoring Positives. So there are programs that are providing that direct programming services to youth. Does that help?
Which are you don't have to go back and read them all, but are any of those part of the new ones that you were mentioning?
Yes. So that would be Mentoring Positives, Mentoring Positives, Allied Wellness, Bayview, YWCA. Those are all of our youth-focused agencies.
And then my last question, I know in the discussions we were having about the youth-oriented part, and again, I still need to read all of the things, but for the ones who are concerning themselves with serving young people especially, I guess I just want to understand from you, do you feel like they'll be able to, deliver on tracking the measurements, I guess, that we talked about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That conversation will happen when we meet with agencies once once we begin the contract negotiation phase.
Okay.
So we know that a lot of the agencies may not be receiving what they originally asked for. And so that's going to change the scope of the work that's going to be able to be done as well. And so once we have those conversations with agencies, as we're working through their contract, we will be working with them on those deliverables and outcomes and talking with them about how they're going to be able to meet them, what types of supports are they going to be needing. And then they, as a group of serving service providers, will also be coming together to meet other agencies that are also serving young people, meeting with MPD, NMSD, other partners to kind of share what they're doing in terms of their services and supports, but also hearing from those other service providers of how they can kind of work collaboratively with one another. So a lot of what your question is around, do we know if they will be able to meet that? The immediate answer right now is no, but those are the conversations that we have with them during the contract negotiation phase and working on their scope of services. Does that help?
Yep. And then just one more thing, not necessarily a question, but the position that Alder Evers and I worked on to include in parks, where it would be centered over at, I think, Goodman Pool and that area over there, it would be good. And I don't know how all the different city agencies collaborate regularly on, young people, for example, but it would be good to include that person eventually when they're hired into some of these discussions. So there's just, you know what I mean? Like there's community building among the various positions. Because my biggest thing has always been, what are we doing to help prevent young people, especially from having any engagement with police? But I do appreciate that it's included in the family empowerment piece. So it's like thinking of the entire household versus just the young person. So I think that's helpful. So yeah, that's all I got. But I'll send an email separate from this meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Knox, questions?
Yes, thank you. I'm having problems with buttons as usual. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. And I'll give you a visual also. Maybe. Or maybe not. But anyway, I guess, Yolanda, first of all, I want to apologize for not being able to make that first meeting of the committee. Obviously, I had a commitment on that date, but hopefully we'll have something. Are we going to have a meeting in December or not? Or what do you think? Maybe January?
The hope is to have a meeting in December to orient the committee members to the work of the Community Resources unit and the Community Development Division, as well as provide an update at that meeting on the funding recommendations that have by then have been finalized.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I went through the materials that you sent us, and maybe this isn't where that would be reflected, but when I went through all of the services that these agencies will provide, I only found one agency, Neighborhood House Community Center, that talked about providing services to older adults. And perhaps they're assumed within the family, some other kind of generic designation, but can you tell me kind of what's happening with funding resources to seniors, please?
So this funding process is not specific to older adults. That would be our older adult services funding process that was completed last year. This area, crisis intervention and prevention services, is open to individuals and families. So it's not specific to older adults. It could include older adults, but it also could include children, individuals, families, youth who are at risk of or currently involved in, the youth justice system, and the families that's supporting that young person, but it's not specific to older adults. It's not a requirement outlined in the RFP that there needs to be that population being served. Does that help?
It helps somewhat, even though I know there are many older adults who are providing those services to youth and families, for sure. And I don't know if some of that might be weaved in some of these services, or maybe no one applied specifically for that.
So I think some of that will come out again to Alder Madison's question earlier. Demographics of who the agencies are going to serve are things that we're going to talk about in contract negotiations with agencies. And that is something that we do track in terms of their quarterly progress reporting to understand who they're serving, the ages of those folks that they're serving. And we do have that information in terms of their application. So when they apply, they do have to provide demographic information of who they're serving currently as it relates to the program or service that they're seeking funding for. So we do have that information and we do track that information. But in terms of knowing that specifically right now of who's going to be serving more older adults versus not, that would be something that we would learn more about and discuss with agencies as we're working through their contracts.
Okay, because that kind of gets to a concern that many of us had last year, is once you subordinate a specific constituency within a larger group, then what happens to those priorities in their funding? Certainly, seniors have crisis intervention issues as well as anyone else, right? If not more so. So hopefully in some other series of contracts and funding that'll become apparent that we're servicing the senior population.
Yes, and we do stress in our funding processes and with our agencies that the community resources unit and the work that comes of that unit is multi-generational. But I think we also need to consider the fact that agencies are working with what they're receiving and have to make priorities as well. And so I think agencies are doing the best that they can do with what they receive. And I would say that we probably also would need to continue to advocate and work for additional funding and resources to be able to make sure that we're really able to provide a broad range of services in a multi-generational way.
Okay, I thank you. I appreciate that, Yolanda.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Pritchett, questions?
Yes, Yolanda, before you agreed to fund an agency, you've mentioned trends, you've mentioned services. Before you decide to award a contract to an agency, what do you look for, or what are you looking for when it comes to outcomes? If, for example, you also mentioned the word trends. So if they're looking at trends and they observe that this or that is going on, And then that turns into perhaps looking at an intervention. And then following that intervention, you look for an outcome. So if an agency then applies for and requests funding, what are you looking for with respect to measurable outcomes and or evaluations of things that they have actually accomplished? Especially when you look at that final report that they send back to you. What have they done with the funding that they requested? And how do you decide whether or not they have met, whatever outcomes they stated they were going to try and do?
Sure. So I kind of hear two parts in your question. So I'll start with the first in terms of funding recommendation considerations, and this is outlined on page 2 of the funding recommendation document that you all have. We take into a number of different criteria when taking into consideration our funding recommendations. So the priority service type, the demonstrated need that's reflected in the community, past grant performance, as well as funding that's available. Are they coordinating and collaborating and partnering with other service providers? Are they connecting to the population that is needing to be served, intended to be served? And what is the different geographic areas, target populations that they are being served? So that's kind of one of the things that we take into consideration as we're proposing funding recommendations. The second part of that, once those funding recommendations are decided upon and approved, then when we are working with agencies, we track their outcomes and measurements by way of quarterly progress reports and an annual outcomes report. And we use those quarterly progress reports to see and track how agencies are doing on a quarterly basis. Are they meeting their outcomes? Are they exceeding their outcomes? Are their outcome goals maybe too low? And then working with them on a quarterly basis to address any concerns or situations that come up as we're reviewing those reports. We also do regular on-site visits with agencies. So not only just reading about the outcomes, but we're actually seeing them done in real time when that's possible. And then also using the end of year report to reflect on what they were able to do within that year, what successes, challenges, barriers did they face. And then as we work with them for that next contract year, we kind of use that as a guide to help inform, do we need to adjust their outcomes, or have they exceeded this outcome and maybe we need to increase the goal number that they may have for that particular outcome. So it's an interactional, collaborative process. We're working with the agencies pretty regularly by reviewing their quarterly progress reports, but then also just having those regular dialogues and check-ins with them to make sure that they are on target with their outcomes. And if they can't be on target for some reason, for example, COVID, there needed to be a shift in how agencies were providing services just based on the situation. And so working and making those adjustments as needed. Does that help?
Not quite. Yeah. What I'm trying to get at is this, and I'm looking primarily at the beneficiaries of these programs. For example, if someone has noticed that there's a trend going on when you start looking at the behaviors of, let's say, tweens, and we notice that they're getting into more trouble after school. And so you've noticed that's getting progressively worse. Now you have a collaboration with different agencies that work with with teens, for example, looking at mentoring positives. I know Will Green very well. Now, when someone requests funding and they say, we have noticed this particular trend with our youth, and this is what we plan to do. Now, when you look at that report at the end of the year, or progress report, have they identified or have they clearly stated what some of the outcomes are Are there changes in the behaviors of these kids? Have they noticed that they are less violent? They're less this, they're less that. Those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for that would say to me as a funding agency, gee whiz, they are doing what they say they wanted to do. But absent that, we don't know whether or not the interventions that they put in place are working, or whether or not maybe another agency could do a better job. Those are the kinds I'm looking at in terms of looking for outcomes and evaluations of whatever it is that they are doing.
Yeah, so that is included in the quarterly progress reports that we are reviewing quarterly, and as well as the annual reports.
Can you give me like an example?
I can't. I don't have that level of detail in front of me to provide that, but I'm happy to follow up with you to give you some examples at a later date if you'd like that.
I mean, some kind of an evaluation summary that kind of gives me an idea as to whether or not interventions are making a difference, whether or not there are trends up or down, whether or not collaborative efforts, if we do this and this group does that, how does that all fit together with respect to the outcomes that you're really looking for as a result of providing funding? Thank you.
I can try to pull some information together to help share that.
Thank you. I would greatly appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Madison, additional questions?
It may not be necessary now, but I was going to use myself as an example to answer the Alder's question, having worked with Yolanda over the years. But doesn't seem like it's necessary now.
Thank you, Alder. All right. I have no other Alders with questions on item 5. Item 5 has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record that vote. And then that will bring us to item 25, which is Legistar 90967, the year-end appropriation resolution. You'll forgive me if I don't read the entire title. But let's start with the presentation from staff.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. As with the title, the resolution itself is extremely dense, so we're going to go through a presentation to highlight some of the key elements. All right. So to start off, this table has a summary of the general fund projection that shows the adopted budget, the 2025 adopted budget compared to the revised budget and the year-end projection. And the last column, the difference, shows the difference between where we're projecting to end the year compared to the revised budget. The numbers in green that are negative indicate a surplus, and then the red indicates a deficit. So you can see here, I'll go through each of these sections in more detail in the following slides. But when we're looking at general fund revenues, we're expecting revenues to be higher than budgeted by $9 million. For expenditures, agency revenues are a little overstated, and the projection is that they'll be about $80,000 lower than budgeted, and that overall expenditures will be about $2.8 million lower than budgeted. So combining the surplus in revenues and the underspending in expenditures, we're expecting to end the year with about $10.6 million, with a $10.6 million surplus. Going into some of the significant revenue variances, as I mentioned, the total of general fund revenue is projecting $9 million above the revised budget, or $11.3 million above the original budget. As a reminder, we do these big resolutions twice a year, and during the mid-year resolution, we appropriated $2.3 million in fund balance in the general fund to increase our expenditure capacity related to our expenditure restraint limit. But this $9 million is mostly comprised of continuing higher interest earnings and mark-to-market adjustments. So this is 8.8 million. There's also an additional 1.7 million in higher ambulance billings related to Medicaid funding, and it assumes that we don't have to use any of the fund balance that was included in the budget. We've talked a lot about expenditure restraint, or ERIP, throughout the 2026 budget development process, but many of these considerations also apply to the 2025 year-end resolution. Right now, our budget is at the maximum expenditure capacity, so even though we have more revenues than budgeted, we can't appropriate them because we can't increase our associated expenditures. On the expenditure side, overall, the general fund is projected to be 2.8 million below the budget. And this is, I have two slides explaining the changes in expenditures. The first is focused on the agency budgets. So this is everything excluding direct appropriations, which is where we budget for some centrally budgeted benefits and transfers. So within the agency budgets, agencies are looking to be about 3.4 million under budget before all of the transfers that we're proposing in this resolution. Something that's important to note is most of this underspending is accounted for in two agencies. IT is about 1.3 million under budget due to the timing of multi-year contracts that were budgeted in 25 but were fully paid in 2024. And CDD is under budget by about 700,000 due to some underspending in community agency contracts and higher than anticipated salary savings from vacancies. These agencies were a bit of outliers, and underspending in most other agencies was much more modest than this amount. Overall, this agency underspending is less than prior years by a few $1 million. I'll talk more about that on a future slide. And one of the reasons we think this is happening, that the budget is tighter at the end of the year, is because we do have a higher salary savings rate that we implemented in 2024 to reflect the fact that we did have more vacancies in agencies. So we have a built-in 3% vacancy rate in our salary calculations. And 2025 was also the second year that we did an across-the-board 1% budget cut in all agencies. Because the budgets are getting tighter, we did reduce this in the 2026 budget from a 1% cut to a 0.75% cut so that agencies will be able to manage their budget and have a little more flexibility given these trends, and we'll continue to monitor budgets through this projection process in the upcoming year. As I mentioned, we also have a budget for what we call direct appropriations, and these are central funds for various benefits that aren't allocated to a specific agency. One of the large components of this is compensated absence escrow, which is a benefit for retirees. We budgeted $4.3 million, and the expenses occur within the agency budgets. The resolution proposes transferring 1.2 million of the 4.3 to agencies where the retiree benefit is resulting in a deficit in the agency budget. This leaves 3.1 million in comp absence escrow that will be available to transfer to cover other agency deficits. Direct appropriations also houses the contingent reserve. So there's 2.1 million there that's proposed to be transferred out to various agency deficits, as well as partially funding the shelter endowment. Direct appropriations is also where we budget for other grants. The resolution proposes increasing this account by $1 million to fund the shelter endowment by transferring funds from underspending in other agencies in the contingent reserve. And it also increases the Metro Transit subsidy by $5.6 million to cover projected deficits. That's a combination of higher than budgeted expenses and lower than anticipated revenues. Just to summarize a few key points before I go into the specifics of the resolution. One is agency underspending is significantly less than prior years. For comparison, I mentioned this year's underspend is projected at 2.8 million. Last year's year-end resolution projected a underspending of of $5.4 million. And in 2023, we were projecting underspending by $13.5 million. And that large amount was related also to federal funding from ARPA and other factors. But the budget is getting tighter over the last several years. I mentioned in the prior slide that we've deliberately taken some actions to align the budget to actuals, like the increased salary savings and the budget efficiency, so that to be able to realize some of the savings that we know occur throughout the year. But you can see that in the numbers here. And I mentioned the 25 budget is at the ERIP limit, so we can't appropriate new funds to address deficits or fund priorities like the shelter endowment. So we're really relying on moving around the underspending and centrally budgeted funds to cover these additional costs. And as we're looking into 2026, the 26 budget is starting pretty much at the ERIP limit with a small margin for adjustments. This budget does address some of the issues that are coming up in the year end. We've increased the general fund subsidy for Metro and reduced the 1% efficiency so that agencies should have enough budget room at the start of the year to manage their budgets. But it's important to consider that we'll need to really closely monitor expenditures and the projections throughout the year. And if there are unanticipated needs or emergencies, we may have to make transfers like you're seeing here to move underspending from agencies into other priorities. With that, I'm just going to summarize some of the key components of the resolution itself, and then we can take questions. So the first component is transferring funding from direct appropriations and other agency underspending to cover deficits, transferring $1 million for a shelter endowment, making various intra-departmental transfers and other adjustments within agency budgets, and making adjustments to several capital budgets. So within direct appropriations and agency underspending, I mentioned comp absence escrow has $4.3 million budgeted. We need $1.2 million to cover agency expenses. So we'll transfer $1.2 million from direct appropriations to agency budgets where the expense is occurring, and then transfer the remaining $3.1 million for other deficits. Contingent reserve, the $2.1 million will go to cover agency deficits and a portion of the shelter endowment. And then some of the agencies that had a larger amount or percentage of underspending, including information technology and assessor, we're moving funds from that underspending, again, to cover deficits and some of these other priorities. The agencies or places that are receiving the funding that's being moved, there were several agencies that were projecting to be over budget for various reasons. They could have, several of these are related to personnel changes and double fills or severance pay that resulted in salary and benefits costs being higher than budgeted. Others are related to higher purchase services. So civil rights, clerk, EAP, and fleet will receive funding through these transfers. And we also do have to increase the direct appropriations amount for revenue sharing agreements with other municipalities. And this was related to an adjustment that we didn't account for when developing the budget. And then the other agency receiving additional funding is Metro Transit. So the general fund subsidy will increase by about $5.8 million. A majority of this is related to higher personnel costs. So salaries and benefits are about $2.5 million higher than budget, primarily related to overtime. And purchase services is about $850,000 above budget, related to cost for electricity, a state excise tax on EV charging and paratransit costs. In addition to these higher expenses, the projected revenues were the revenue projection was lower than what was in the budget by about $2.4 million. And this is aligning revenue expectations with partner agreements as well as passenger revenues. So the total subsidy after the various transfers will be $25.6 million, and that's pretty closely in line with what we have budgeted for 2026. The second main component of the resolution is transferring $1 million for a shelter endowment. So back in 2021, the city committed $2 million to capitalize an endowment for shelter operations that was originally planned as part of our American Rescue Plan Act funds. It was determined this wasn't an eligible use for the federal funds, so we made a general fund appropriation in 2023. Funds weren't expended in that fiscal year, so they lapsed into the general fund as assigned fund balance for this purpose. The 25 budget doesn't have sufficient expenditure capacity to allocate this full amount. So instead, we're utilizing underspending in PCED agencies. That's about $930,000, a majority of this coming from within CDD itself, as well as a contingent reserve to make that first disbursement of $1 million to the Shelter Friends of Dane County or their fiscal operators to begin seeding this endowment. The resolution also authorizes signing an agreement in a form approved by the attorney for the use of these funds. So this is the first half of the $2 million commitment. The remaining $1 million will need to be accommodated within future budgets, and we'll need to factor in both funding availability as well as the ERIP capacity in each year. The next set of changes is more of the technical nature of making transfers within agency budgets or other adjustments to revenues. For intra-agency transfers, there are about a dozen of these. These are net neutral transfers within a budget, primarily moving money to non-personnel majors so that agencies don't hit any budget stops. And these transfers are both within general fund and non-general fund agencies, but it doesn't change the overall expenditure level of the budget. Within the fleet fund, the fleet is anticipating to be over budget due to higher than budgeted expenses, as well as some overestimated revenues. So adjusting both expenses and revenues puts them at a deficit of about $250,000. The resolution would increase the fleet budget and interdepartmental billings, as well as increase ID charges in user agencies. So that's agencies that use fleet services like fire, police, streets, and parking. The resolution also appropriates funds approved through prior legislation or budgets. There are cases within CDA and CDD's CDBG fund where funding was appropriated through a Legistar file or prior year budget, but was not appropriately reauthorized in the budget. So this is more of a technical adjustment to recognize those funds this year so the agencies have that full budget authority. And these are related to grants and things that were not properly rolled over. And then within enterprise funds, several of our enterprise funds have higher than budgeted revenues. So the resolution will increase their revenues and associated expenses. Within Gulf, they're continuing to have a strong year. So their budget will increase by $175,000 to cover additional expenses. Monona Terrace has higher facility use charges by $365,000, and that will help offset the cost of their operations. And Water also has higher miscellaneous revenues by $220,000 that will help cover the cost of comp absence escrow and benefits within that agency. And then my final slide is related to capital budget adjustments. So there are a number of capital projects that require an adjustment, and these are all either transfers or increasing funding from non-borrowing sources. So within engineering major streets, there's a proposed transfer between reconstruction streets and pavement management to align the assessment budget to actuals across these two programs. Within library, a proposal to increase the collections budget for the Imagination Center by $550,000 using library fund balance. Within parks, a transfer of $266,000 between parkland acquisition and parkland improvements, and water appropriating $1 million in expense depreciation revenues and reserves for the water means program. And then there are a series of technical adjustments related to swapping GEO proceeds across projects so that we comply with federal tax laws and use the proceeds within the time frame that within a certain time frame after they were borrowed, and that doesn't change the actual budget for any projects. So I'll stop there, and we can take any questions.
Thank you, Christine. Are there questions on the presentation? Alder Revere.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Christine, for the excellent presentation. Just start out with a housekeeping reminder, if we could include your presentation in Legistar. I know you said that that would be done, but it hasn't. I see it's not in Legistar yet. I know that the presentation will be very helpful to the public and our colleagues that could refer to it in the future. My first question is a more general one, and that is with all that you just shared with us, what is our estimated fund balance at year end going to look like?
I'll take an estimate of that. That really depends on how we close out the year, but it'll probably be close to 120 million, and that'll be around 28% of the general fund budget.
And could you remind us, please? Thank you, Dave. Could you remind us, please, where were we at this time a year ago with fund balance in comparison, approximately?
So we finished 2024 with about $110 million in fund balance, and we were at about 27% of the general fund budget.
Thank you. Obviously, the most robust fund balance in history by far here. So thanks for that. And then why don't I pivot, Mayor, to Metro Transit? So these might be more appropriate questions for our former interim Metro General Manager, who I see is with us, and appreciate Eric not being here. But obviously, whoever's most appropriate to answer the question would be great. So, Eric, are you with us? I think you are.
I'm not sure. Oh, he is here. At least virtually.
Right. I still am in the participant list, Mayor, but maybe he's had to step away.
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I'm here. I do not have video, but I am here.
Great. Thank you. Thanks very much for being here, Eric. By the way, are you still at Metro or are you back in Parks Division?
I am back in the Parks Division, full, we'll call it 99.9%, unless if Jamie needs me.
Well, welcome back, and thank you for your service again. Anyway, obviously, we talked about Metro's projected deficit when we had the mid-year appropriation resolution before us. And I know you've been working hard to put Metro's financial house in order as you wrapped up your work as the interim general manager there. Could you speak generally to where we are with Metro's financial house? I know you were able to have Wayne Block and Kathy Schwinn come out of retirement to help us out. Obviously, we're still in the midst, it looks like, of recruiting for a transit finance manager. Could you just speak generally to, from your perspective, obviously on the inside, where we are now and moving into the future?
Certainly happy to do that. I guess what the first thing I would say is it's to significantly more stable. And I think you'll see that, as Christine mentioned, the adopted budget for 26 and now our end of the year projection for 25 are relatively in line as far as total general fund support for Metro. I don't think the 25 budget was realistic given labor cost, the realities of operating the routes, the cost of electricity, the unanticipated electricity cost, and some presumptions about partner revenues and how those would grow over time. I do want to be highlighted on that area. Those are still, under the agreements we have, will grow over the next few years. It's just the rate of growth and the timing of that growth compared to when it was originally anticipated in the 24-25 budgets, I think was the kind of the critical path item on the revenue side. As far as I'm least equipped, unfortunately, to speak to fare box revenue and the like. There's been so much technological change and programmatic change that I think it requires more data. Jamie is on this and looking at, fare capping. It's a great concept. I don't think it was addressed in the budgetary process very adequately, but Jamie's on that one as far as revenue. Partner revenues will go up. I would say somewhat significantly now over a period of time that isn't 1 year, right? It's not a 1 year catch up, but the UW as an example, they have a 4-year rolling stock of ridership that drives their payment. That ridership currently, we're just starting to drop off the COVID years, right, where ridership was down. So we do anticipate real growth in that revenue over the next few years. Labor costs are now known. Now they're going to grow under the contract with Teamsters, but they're known. They were unknown a year ago, right? And so I think that known commodity is real. I do think some of the transitional cost in route redesign, implementation of BRT have kind of been embedded. Some of the technology costs are now understood and known. The cost of Masabi, which is the group who runs our new fare box system, right, are understood and known. Wayne Block, I give him a huge shout out there. Him and Kathy together kind of solved that. So I think the right answer here, Alder Revere, is much more stable. Certainly not. I can't say perfectly solid and clearly clear where we'll be in 5 years, but we're in a place where we can now, I think, expect Jamie and her team to have those projections over the next year to two. I think that's how I would assess it. I wish I could tell you it's a great position and condition. I think it's more of a stable position and a reasonably good place to assess the future conditions. Does that help?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Eric. You certainly identified some of the specifics I was planning to ask you about. So thanks for doing that. As it relates to labor costs, obviously the biggest driver of the projected deficit, could you give us a current status update on how we are trending with overtime and how the new collective bargaining agreement with the Teamsters will affect that?
I think the first and most important thing as it relates to overtime, very frankly, is fully staffing our drivers, right? And we've had some struggles in the past, but we are continuing to do that. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head over beer. I can tell you we made marginal progress over the last 8 months as far as vacancy reduction. And unfortunately, that vacancy reduction isn't just in vacancies. They're also in folks not able to be here on leave in some manner, right? But we saw some progress, but unfortunately, those vacancies lead to more overtime to fill the routes, right? Now, one of the other things I want to highlight for the talented team, including members of the Teamsters and the Run Cut Committee and all the work that staff do, because that's the thing I left Metro with the most. Is there's 500 people over there, and there are a lot of really talented folks who care a lot about providing great service. And they've been working together. I do think there's some efficiencies in how we deliver that solid level of service, but more effectively, just with some smart choices on how we create the runs and the picks in the future. I can't speak to those in detail because A, I wasn't directly involved, and B, it's not soup yet, but I know there's commitment to work on those. But the overtime is stabilized. 25 is, I think, very consistent with where the latter half of 24 was when the current routes have been in place and running. And I don't see a reason for it. It should not go up. I'll say it that way. That's me being presumptive for Jamie and the team, but it should should not go up. I think it's stable with an outlook of being able to pull that down with some effective collaborative management.
And are we doing better in terms of recruitment for operators?
Like I said, we closed that gap a little. I would hate to say better, because I'm not going to be satisfied. I don't think anybody is until we really have those positions filled. But the recruitment's going, I would say, okay. I think the retention remains a concern in those early months. But those are items that frankly, I think Jamie has a better feel for the industry of how to manage and do that better. But I think it's okay and stable, not where we want it to be.
Thanks again for all these responses, Eric. And you obviously already also mentioned the projected decrease in revenue. Can you just confirm? So you spoke to, for example, the UW Madison contract. I presume that's the employee bus passes primarily, or maybe also the student bus passes, or all of the above. Same with the hospital. Is the majority of our deficit in terms of partner revenues coming from those employee pass programs, or is it also intergovernmental revenue that we had anticipated from our suburban neighbors that are in the system with us?
So I'm very confident how to describe partners. I think the neighboring partner municipalities are contributing what we have been contracted to work with them on, and that is very consistent with what was included in the budgets over this year, 25 and 26. The UW's budgetary numbers are catching up as they grow because they're retroactively forecast. I think the biggest gap in the partner from budget to actual in 25, and we've made some adjustments in 26 to budget for it, is in the MMSD contract for the provision of the Dodger routes and the passes. There continue to be conversations there. I do anticipate growth in revenue from that relationship. We are not in a place to project how much. We did do that in the 25 budget. We made a projection in the 25 budget anticipating growth that was not yet negotiated and adopted. And that was a mistake.
Yeah, thank you. And I remember you spoke to that, and when again we were discussing the mid-year appropriation resolution. Yes.
Yeah, and I do think there'll be some growth there. That's what I'm saying. And in the partner communities, so Sun Prairie, Fitchburg, Monona, Verona, I hope I didn't miss one off the Shorewood. All those agreements do have growth.
Middleton.
Inflationary. Middleton, sorry, Mayor. I was just started going in geographically, and I got sideways. I was going counterclockwise, and I messed it up. Stop. But they all have some growth components in them, and kind of how they work. So there will be growth. And they are paying their share under the contract, right? And those contracts are all current and up to date. And I would say those are the strongest as far as budget to actual relationship at this time.
Well, thanks very much, Eric. Yeah, thanks very much, Eric. I appreciate all your responses, and moreover, thanks again for your service over at Metro. I'm confident that you are leaving Metro in a better place than you found it, especially in the area of labor and personnel matters. So thanks very much.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. Mayor, I have some other kind of random questions about other agencies. Should I proceed?
Please do.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious about the underspending, and I appreciate, Christine, you sharing in your presentation that you and your team are confident that you've kind of addressed the myriad of issues that the end of year appropriation resolution are addressing in our 2026 adopted budgets. But specifically, just had a couple questions about the underspending and how it relates to the 26 adopted budgets. So first for IT, and that over $1 million in underspending for, which I guess mostly relates to the timing of service contracts. Is that something that clearly we won't see again as a result of what was identified this go around?
Yes, we don't anticipate that being an issue in the 26 budget. It was related to a GASB change in how we account for prepaid multi-year contracts. We had budgeted to split those costs across 3 years, and we had to pay that full amount in 2024 when the contract was initiated, and that generated a large amount of savings in 25.
Oh, I see. Okay, very good. And then as it relates to CDD and the purchase of service agency contracts that I presume are the underspending for purchase services, and I appreciate that, again, our CDD director is still with us. So I don't know if you want to respond to it or Jim, but just curious if you could be a little more specific about the timing of the savings, why there is that amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings for purchase services and CDD, and again, what that means for the next fiscal year. Thank you, Jim, for remaining with us.
Sure, Alder. So, we're talking about $300,000 or $400,000 on about a $13 million community contract base. So it seems like a larger number, but when you compare it to the base, it's not uncommon for agencies to underspend as they experience. It's usually staff turnover that that prevents them from utilizing their entire contractual amounts. Every once in a while, an agency won't be able to complete its contract, but more often than not, it's a function of losing staff and needing to replace staff and experiencing some cost savings related to that.
Thank you. So you would say, Jim, that this is not out of the ordinary whatsoever, that this $400,000 or thereabouts is kind of on average underspending for purchase services in your agency in prior years. We just haven't had it called out like we are this year in the resolution before us because it's funding the all-important shelter endowment in part.
Yeah, we rarely spend the entirety of those community contracts. We also have had, I think, Alder, we've had a chronic underspend in tuition assistance. That's something that we're in the midst of working on as a team, the child care unit. So I expect that will be addressed in one direction or another within the context of the next budget cycle. That's contributing something on the order of $170,000 to that total.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for reminding us about that. And I appreciate that you're working to solve that unfortunate underutilization. Okay, thanks very much. I appreciate it, Jim. And then, Mayor, just last but certainly not least, I have a question about library. And that is with the appropriation proposed in the resolution for Imagination Center from the library fund balance. I was just curious what the approximate current estimated library fund balance is today. And I don't know, I see our library directors here. Thank you for being with us. Also, Tana, so I don't know if you have that off the top of your head or finance staff would respond to that.
Thank you for the question. Finance might have more information, but I believe it's a little over 2 million at present.
Thank you. Is it, Christine, it looked like you were making a motion. Is that
I was agreeing with that.
Okay, I figured you were. Thanks very much. Sounds good. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate your responses. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions on item 25? Seeing none, then President Vitiver, can I get a motion on item 25, please?
Move to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt item 25. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of item 25? Seeing no objection, we're recording unanimous vote in favor of item 25. Will take us to item 26, which is a discussion item, Letter Star 91045, the internal audit update and fleet services audit presentation. And I will turn it over to finance staff again.
Thanks, Mayor. Hopefully, COLA is coming online here.
Good evening, everyone. I want to share my screen. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to present our update on the internal audit 2025 annual plan. At its February 3rd, 2025 meeting, this committee approved 9 projects as part of the internal audit work plan for 2025. At the end of October, we have completed 6 out of the 9 projects, while we are currently working on the last 3 projects for the year. The ongoing projects include audit of the employee-assisted programs and the parking division, and the annual enterprise risk assessment. The projects are expected to be completed by the end of the year, with their reports submitted to this committee in January 2026. Here is the update of the key findings from the fleet services audit. We had the following as some of the key findings. 1, allocation of vehicle acquisition costs to appropriate capital programs. Between 2020 and 2024, the fleet services expended approximately $1.3 million from the fire apparatus vehicle project for purchase of general vehicles in the city fleet. The error was also noticed by the fleet management while we were auditing them. We made recommendations that help to strengthen controls to prevent similar errors going forward. In addition, we also identified the need to adhere to the P-card maximum dollar policy. The audit identified 2 instances in 2024 where P-cards single transactions exceeded the city's 10,000 maximum limit. These transactions included the purchase of vehicle parts and payment of auto body repairs on a damaged asset. Part of our recommendation includes protocols that will help to ensure consistent compliance with the P-card policy. Reconciliation of assets in the financial system. We found discrepancies in assets values between the finance and the fleet records, particularly for assets with add-on components that brings the assets to their present use, operational use. We made recommendation to establish a routine reconciling process to ensure that asset values in both records, that is the fleet records and the finance team's records, reflect the complete and the accurate cost of each of these assets with additional components. Finally, we saw the need for continuous improvement in monitoring of the fleet inventory. The audit highlighted the need for ongoing monitoring of fleet inventory through regular access verification. The division has agreed to implement the recommended protocols to support periodic inventory checks. These are the main key findings, and other detailed findings and recommendations are included in the audit report, which has been shared with everyone. For the next our next presentation in January 2026, we will be presenting the result of the 2025 Enterprise Risk Assessment and its contingent cities emerging risk. We also hope that by then we would have completed the Employees Assistance Program audit and the Parking Division audit, thereby presenting our findings at the next January meeting. We will also be presenting at the January meeting our 2026 audit program, which will be submitted for the approval of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Kola. Are there questions on the presentation? Alder Verveer?
No, thank you very much, Mayor. So I was hoping that we could get, if you will, a management response. Obviously, there is included in the 45-page fleet audit report are management responses, and I was hoping we could get a summary of the management responses, either from directly from fleet or from Public Works coordinator. I don't know who wants to go first, and I also appreciate that fire department leadership is with us, and I have a question or two for them as well as it relates to this. So thank you, Rachel, for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Alder. First, I just want to say that the whole process with COLA, I mean, it is a long process to go through an audit, as we all know, but COLA's recommendations coming out of this they're going to make fleet better. I think one of the things that I want to highlight is that like Kola said, the biggest finding, we caught that earlier this year. We shared that with Kola and his team, and we have some good recommendations in place to make sure that these procedures are followed in the future. Under my tenure as the assistant fleet superintendent, all of our capital expenditures have been in the proper budget pools. And I feel very confident in the staff that we have working on this right now. And I feel very confident in the coordination that we're doing with the fire department in order to make them whole in future years. They're doing fairly well right now. We actually have a couple engines coming in and a couple ambulances coming in. Some of these replacement acquisitions are making their way through. And, you know, I think there are a lot of instances in Cola's long report that highlight those continuous improvements that we're making across all of fleet operations. One in particular that I'm really excited for is the ability to do more with our inventory management. We will be hiring an operations clerk come the new budget year to really focus on our parts inventory process and ramp up the support that we're providing that team, which is 3 very hardworking individuals currently providing about $800,000 annual inventory of stocked fleet parts and purchasing all of the parts for all of the repairs that go on. And so we're going to be able to do more tracking of all of the improvements that we're making, any discrepancies with that new position. And, you know, I think that the other thing I want to point out with this report is there's a lot of coordination that happens within fleet as an internal service agency with other agencies. So be that with the agencies that we're procuring equipment on behalf of, like the fire department, or working with the finance team on making sure that all of our records are matching and that we are reconciling things annually. These are really good improvements that we're going to be making in the next year. And I feel very positive about how the staff are going to be rolling it out.
Thanks very much, Rachel, and I appreciate your assurances that that you and your team are doing everything you can to rectify this. Some of the unfortunate issues that Gola came up with in his internal audit. As it relates to the big one, the misappropriation, if you will, clearly though, albeit accidental, misappropriation of the $1.3 million on what should have been spent on fire. And you've already spoken to this, Rachel, but in other words, how to make fire right in terms of the harm, if you will, that's been done in terms of their prior year capital budgets and that money being misappropriated and spent on other agencies. Could you speak a little more detailed or maybe if you think it's more appropriate to have the chief or deputy chief weigh in at this point, that might be more appropriate. Whatever you'd like to say.
Sure, I can start, and then if Chief Carbon or Chief Moravec would like to jump in, they're welcome to. Part of why this happened in the first place is, during the pandemic years, the ordering timeline for these big replacement purchases of fire apparatus was extremely long. So we were not even able to place orders for fire at that point. And that just kind of created the opportunity for this. And so in terms of making fire whole in the coming years, we'll be working with Chief Carbon and Chief Moravec to create a plan to make sure that they're getting those funds in the next couple of years to identify the specific apparatus that we're going to make sure that we are replacing and ordering in that timeline without causing any additional or unintended harm to other agencies who we've been working very closely with to make sure that we are developing detailed capital improvement plans and have on the horizon list, like these are the things that we know that we need to purchase for streets or parks or any of the other agencies that we are purchasing large pieces of equipment for as well. And as you know, an engine can be upwards of $1 million. So I think that $1.3 million and one engine, it's not going to make sense to do it all in 1 year and make that pain happen to other agencies as well. So we will be working closely with fire to identify exactly how much in each year. I expect to see that probably roll out in the capital submission that we do in the spring, just so you can outline that and see that in detail.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rachel. The chief or deputy chief wish to comment? I can ask specific questions of you, but if you wanted to speak generally to your response to this, and I know you've obviously been working very closely, chiefs, with Rachel and her team at Fleet to make sure that you try to remain on schedule as possible with your purchases from Pierce and other equipment vendors.
Yeah, thank you, Alder, and good evening, everyone. I'll jump in on this only because Chief Moravec is traveling and was nice enough to jump on his cell phone. I'm not sure exactly where he's at, but if we need specific apparatus details, he can certainly jump in and help out a little bit further. But I think in a big picture, Rachel did a very nice job, from my opinion, summing things up. We've got a great relationship with Fleet, open communications. And I think that overall we're positioned well right now. We've got apparatus that's been ordered. We've got apparatus in progress, in delivery, and then we've got orders for the out years that we're working on, and as well have a 5-year plan for a replacement schedule. Obviously in a dream world, there's apparatus that we'd like to be a little bit more aggressive on the replacement timeline, but as we all know, these have gotten expensive and much more expensive in a hurry. And so, in that balance of trying to make sure we have good, reliable equipment and trying to be prudent with the budget and play in with the needs of the entire city, I think I can say overall, we feel like we're in a comfortable and in a good position right now.
That's great to hear. Yeah, thanks very much, Chief. Thanks for being with us again tonight for this item. And appreciate hearing that you think that we're not falling behind in any way, shape, or form. It sounds like in terms of our apparatus being up and running, even with the delays that the pandemic brought. So thanks for that. And then let me just say, Mayor, I don't know that I have I don't have any other questions for the chief. So thanks, Chief. I just wanted to. This might be more for finance leadership, but in terms of how this appears in the books, in other words, like journal entries and so forth, has all of that work been done based on the internal audit findings? Have we now, like for example, moved all the journal entries and corrected the errors that were uncovered, either specifically that Fleet found or COLA found?
Alder Revere, that work is ongoing. So we are working with Fleet closely on that to identify all the transactions. That does kind of interact with what Rachel was talking about in terms of follow-on legislation, whether it be the 2027 capital budget or if something's needed in the interim. But we are working through that right now.
Thank you. So let me just say in closing, Mayor, I don't have any further questions, but I just want to thank Rachel very much for her leadership. What I said about our former interim Metro General Manager, I'd say the same about you, Rachel, as an Assistant Fleet Superintendent. You've obviously been leading the agency for a very long time and appreciate all that you do. So thank you for your work and for responding to these recommendations immediately and cooperatively and collaboratively with COLA. And thank you, as always, COLA, for your work. We appreciate it very much and look forward to your next update for us. It sounds like next month already in January. But thank you for your work. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions on the presentation? If not, thank you, COLA. Appreciate it. And that was just a presentation, so we don't need to take any action. Our next item is a closed session item. So when the Finance Committee considers the following matter, it may go into closed session pursuant to section 19.85 sub 1 sub E of the Wisconsin statutes, which reads as follows. Deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. If the Finance Committee does go into closed session, notice is hereby given pursuant to section 19.85 sub 2 of the Wisconsin statutes that it may reconvene in open session without waiting 12 hours as specified in the statute. The item that we will be going into closed session for is item 27, Legistar 91046, a discussion regarding negotiations with Halo Real Estate Ventures for possible investment of tax increment financing funds into a mixed-use project known as the Ramish Farm Development, proposed to be located in the vicinity of 4000 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue. So on this item, can I have a motion, please, to go into closed session?
Move to go into closed session.
Second.
Moved and second to go into closed session. It does require a roll call vote. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no, as your name is called. And I'll ask Dave to please call the roll.
Council President Vitiver.
Aye.
Alder Revere.
Aye.
Alder Govindarajan.
Aye.
Alder Madison.
Aye.
Alder Evers. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes.
Thank you. The ayes have it, and so we will go into closed session. I'll ask staff that are not necessary for this item to excuse themselves, and note that alders, whether you're on Finance Committee or not, are welcome to stay. And we'll give a moment for staff to take us down from the award-winning City Channel.
All right, Mayor, looks like we're down. Okay, Mayor, we are back up and running.
Thank you very much. So we are coming out of the Finance Committee closed session on item 27, which is Legistar 91046, a discussion regarding negotiations with Halo Real Estate Ventures for possible investment of tax increment finance funds into a mixed-use project known as the Ramish Farm Development, proposed to be located in the vicinity of 4000 Packers Avenue and 4201 North Sherman Avenue. The committee received a briefing, discussed the project and potential negotiating stances, and instructed staff as to their opinions on those stances. And that is the last item on our agenda tonight. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good evening.